Today I am joined by Katrina Delaney, who is one of 5 candidates running for 2 open seats for 3 years in the Pembroke School Committee. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. We're going to get right into our questions.
Awesome.
Okay, so question number 1. How do you determine your budget priorities given the mandates that you have no control over, the state funding which has not been finalized, and do you think a decrease in enrollment should tie in with a decrease in school funding? So that's really a two-part question.
Great question. So what I feel with that is that it really needs to start with our school building principles. You know, one of the things that I heard Erin Obie, the superintendent, say is that budgetary decisions are really based on the mission, the vision, and the goals of the school principals, because they're the ones really on the ground working with students and teachers and understanding the differences between the campuses. And so, you know, starting with that, looking at the data, and then also looking at what they see, the building principles, as priorities, and using that, the budget, to fulfill that vision. And if there is a need to get more funding, there's creative ways to find that. You know, there's grants, different things like that, to be able to make up for any money that isn't available or won't allow those principals to carry out the vision that they see for their students in their school. In terms of how we look at budget with decreasing enrollment, I think that at the state level, there's a number of things happening. Recently, the per pupil funding rate went from approximately $30,000 to approximately like 100 and something, 108, I believe. I have to take a look at the exact numbers, but that's about what it was.
So it went way up, you're saying?
It went way up, exactly. And that won't, be finalized until towards the fall in terms of the state level funding. But I know that that's something that the school committee is keeping under consideration.
So, but you have to approve a budget at town meeting.
Absolutely.
And you don't know exactly what that state funding is going to be, which is a huge difference between what it is now and what it might be.
Exactly.
So
yes.
How would you prioritize what you would have to put on this is going to have to be cut if we don't get the funding chopping block?
Yeah, I think it boils down to looking at student and staff wellness and safety, right? I think when we think about the policy and curricular decisions that we're making, what is not going to affect that? Obviously, we want our students to achieve and achieve greatly, but if there's something that's going to affect their wellness, their safety, anything like that, we really need to take a look at those things and prioritize them first.
Okay.
And then from there, looking at what the school building principals prioritized as high priority items, because they have their own prioritization that they give as well to the superintendent and the school committee. So thinking about comparing all of that against what our data says. What does our data say? You know, one of the things I really focus on is data-informed decision-making. Because there's tons of data available to us through DESE, through our schools that provide that to DESE, different ways to visualize it.
What is DESE for anyone who doesn't know?
So it's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Okay, okay. So when you say there's a lot of data available and you love to look at data or data, what specifically can you get from the state that will help inform you what you need to do with a budget?
Yeah, great question. So I think when we look at chronic absenteeism, that is something that when we think about our students' mental health, student support services, when kids are not coming to school, there's usually a reason. And so we need to investigate why that is. But if we don't have the data to tell us, then we don't know. And we can take a look at how comparable towns are doing as well. Our neighboring towns as well as comparable districts, because that can really tell us also what are other schools doing that have a similar population? Where might we prioritize as it relates to our student needs right now? Because our student needs 10 years ago are so different than our student needs now, and it's always changing. So I think looking at our student breakdown, their achievement on MCAS, things like that, breaking it down by subcategories in terms of these are our high needs students, these are our students with disabilities, and really taking a look at what services are in place for them and looking at their achievement to determine how we can add additional supports or redistribute, right? Because it's not always adding more. It might be redistribution.
Okay. And for the residents of Pembroke who do not have children in school, and they see the enrollment declining every year, and the housing is not showing that there's going to be a big uptick in enrollment. How do you defend if you even have to,
Yeah.
a school budget that continues to go up when your enrollment continues to go down?
Great question. So I think the piece there that we've seen since COVID, and I know in attending the school committee meetings that this is something Erin Obi talked a lot about, is the mental health needs of our students. There's a rising number of kiddos who need to get mental health support outside of school, sometimes for a short term where they're not attending school. And they have created a ton of different structures, a space where students can come back and have it be kind of a slow rollout to school, so that it's not like you're going from an outpatient mental health support program back to school and back to your regular schedule. So there's a space in which that's very flexible at I believe the middle school, high school level, as well as the elementary school, but I think it's a little bit different from what I've heard. And so that really is a space where you can have that
So that circles
flexibility.
back to your safety for the students.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the main thing is our funding may be our enrollment is going down. However, that's something that's not specific to Pembroke. Enrollment is going down across the board in the state, I believe. And when we're thinking about the increased level of need, that's going to require more funding. And we also do a very good job in terms of being economical with those supports. So that's what I would say. We have to look at the needs, and addressing them now versus waiting is better, because we want to have healthy adults, and that starts in school.
Okay, excellent. Number 2.
Yeah.
The discussion of vocational schooling is not new to Pembroke. The Pathways program is a start, but certainly not the total solution. What planning and initiatives do you think are needed now, and why?
Great question. So that's something I've thought a lot about, because Pembroke has always had, or as far as I can recall, a new growth problem, with revenue. We don't have a ton of businesses necessarily coming in. We're not a huge commercial district. We have, some shops and things like that, and great businesses in town, but not enough to generate the revenue that we need to support our schools in our district and community as a whole, because it is also based on property value, and the Chapter 70 funding formula. And while that long-term is meant to provide equitable funding for schools across the Commonwealth, it does put some towns and cities at a disadvantage. And I'm not saying one way or another about the chapter funding, but way that they do the formula. But what I do know is it causes issues for towns like ours, where, we don't have a ton of revenue coming in from the town. And so a solution that I came up with and talked about a little bit at the town planning meeting was what could we do to capitalize on the resources that we have in town. We have our ponds, right? That's one of the things Pembroke is well known for. And so thinking about having potentially a kayak and canoe rental, and providing that as an internship potentially. And then also there's a couple of food truck owners that are in Pembroke, and I'll be reaching out to folks to check in to see if we could create an internship where we kind of create that sense of place at the town landing. So that used to be when Pembroke was a vacation town, like my dad told me about when he was growing up. His family was from Roxbury. It was a vacation spot, and everybody was going down there for swim lessons and all that stuff.
But as far as vocational schooling goes, I know that there's been some talk about either creating your own vocational school program or joining an existing vocational school. What is your opinion on that whole subject?
Yeah. So I was thinking of it holistically, so thanks for redirecting that one. So with the vocational schools, there's, I think it's Norfolk Aggie, and that one is, definitely we have some students there, but it's a long drive. With South Shore Votech, a number of years ago, Pembroke decided to not, we weren't a part of the vocational South Shore Votech. And now they're, building a new building, and it's going to cost a lot of money to be a part of that regional district, again, having been removed.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we really need to listen to our residents, and I think we need to do a lot of outreach and understand exactly where everybody is, because I think the folks who have kids in schools are going to respond very differently than other folks, and we have to listen to all voices, right? Because we don't just have school-age kids and families living in Pembroke, right? My parents are, more senior and are getting up there, and so I have to think about the budget of the town as a whole. And so I think having new ways that we could provide opportunities through apprenticeships, through internships, and things like that is a way that we could do some of the vocational training without necessarily doing, becoming part of South Shore VOTEC. Not to say that we shouldn't, but I think I really would like to hear from a bulk of the residents before saying one way or another how I feel, because ultimately that's where I get my answers is from folks in town. Another option though with that is there's after dark hours at the vocational schools, so that's something that Pembroke can take advantage of.
And what is that?
So after hours is there's unused space in vocational schools for various programs, and the school district can set up times for students to go and use that space after hours to utilize the kitchen or the shop, things like that. So there's ways to have vocational opportunities in those spaces. I believe that there is.
Is it accredited? I mean,
yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to look that up because I don't know that for sure. But I do know that there is an application that was due in March. So I'm curious to see if Pembroke took advantage of that.
Okay, and what that means.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Question number 3. What is your philosophy on special education? Do you believe that the uptick in students requiring additional services is an anomaly or the future of K through 12 for Pembroke?
Awesome. Yes. So special education is near and dear to my heart. Absolutely. I'm a special ed teacher, administrator by trade, and my daughter has disabilities and will be going to Pembroke Public Schools in the fall. And I think the piece there is that we have to make sure that we're giving a free and appropriate public education, and that's different for every child. We need to start with high quality information, so start with evaluations that are comprehensive, and then use that to determine what supports and services and accommodations are needed for that child. And in terms of if this trend with more and more students needing special education services or 504 plans, things like that, I think it is the new normal. I think that there are a lot of kids and youth that we're finding need more support, whether it be mental health support, ADHD, autism, there's a whole gamut, right? But from what I have seen in my own youth, tons of my friends are late diagnosed with ADHD. I myself late diagnosed with ADHD, and I think that that's actually a strength, but not something that I knew or conceptualized that as a child because I didn't know.
Right.
I just thought I kind of cut people off when I was talking, or was a little too much. And so I think that's one of the things that is really important to me is thinking how can we make sure that we are catching all students. And I think that the student support services at Pembroke, they do a great job with that. But overall, I think we're just seeing more and more kiddos with needs.
So that translates into more and more of a budget.
Yes.
It's a huge budget.
Yes.
Special education overall is a huge budget, and it's only going to get bigger. So, playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
1 or 2 or 10 students are costing the town X amount of money, whereas 100 students are costing that same amount of money. How do you make that work? How do you message that so that it's understood, it's appropriate, and it's supported?
Yeah. So I think with that, there are so the kiddos who are costing the town more money are usually in an out-of-district placement. And so we need to think about the ways in which, and I think Pembroke's done a great job at this, is thinking about how we can expand the programs that we have with the changing level of student need from year to year. Because most school districts often will plan based on what they did the year before, right? That's their starting place. But I think you have to be very responsive to the student needs in front of you from year to year to think about where are they going to get the support they need, and is that something we can provide in district or out of district? Because the cost of transportation alone for out of district placement is one of the largest costs. Right. So another thing we could look at is how we could have in-house transportation for out-of-district placements, certainly something we could explore. But I think expanding our opportunities and utilizing the supports that we already have and getting creative with the programming so that we can address as many student needs as we can in district. And I think that will help with the budget issues there. Okay.
All right, question number 4. There are often 2 very different sides to subject matters that can come before the school committee. As an example, in January, a public meeting was held in regards to political and social advocacy. Did you attend that meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So what is your philosophy on this whole subject? And can you explain it. Can you make a statement and then talk about that meeting?
Yeah. So, great question. Just thinking of how to answer. I think ultimately what that situation came down to is that we already had a policy in place that was following federal guidelines and state guidelines, all of that, and we didn't need to open up that can of worms.
Okay.
And I think it caused more division and harm than was necessary, and there wasn't enough data to back up the need to bring that forth to the school committee. Based on at least Mark Talbot, he had some data that he shared that night. The principal at Pembroke High School talked about the number of students that have, submitted complaints or different things like that through Titan Talk, and it just was a low number. It wasn't enough to, in my mind, bring that forth and make make folks who have, queer kids or trans kids or are a teacher themselves and are gay. That fear is just not worth it for what the benefit would have been, which I'm not quite sure what the benefit would have been exactly. So in terms of where I stand on that, I think it wasn't necessary. We already had a working policy. And
what is that working policy? Is it are students and or teachers allowed to wear things, pins, flags, whatever they want, or are they not within the classroom?
Great question. So within the classroom, they can definitely wear different buttons or things like that that they would like. I know with pride events, they can have rainbow buttons and all that, but teachers aren't forcing kids to wear them, right? So that's, I think, the difference. You're not allowed to wear, let's say somebody's running for campaign. Like I couldn't wear a button in school that said, vote for Katrina Delaney, because that's really related to a political campaign.
Okay.
And so there is a bit of a gray line, but when the school committee talked about how they did a walkthrough, there weren't hardly any flags that were very politicized. It was rainbow flags. It was, that tolerance, things like that that are more universal, not necessarily divisive. And so I don't think that it was necessary based on that data that they shared about the classroom visits. They walked around to all of the classrooms, and based on the data from Mark Talbot in terms of the complaints that might have been coming forth about feeling pressured or feeling like pride flags are forced on you. There just wasn't enough data to back that up.
Okay. So policy's already in existence. There's no need to change it. Is your stance on that?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you think that the Pembroke Public Schools do really, really well?
Yeah.
What would you give them an A on?
That's a fantastic question. I think when I think about Pembroke Public Schools, I think about some of my teachers that are still there, right? Like my sixth grade teacher that's still there, high school teacher, another elementary school teacher that's still working in our schools. And so I think we really have that sense of place and that sense of tradition, right? Which I was mostly a teacher administrator in Washington, D.C., and it's very transient. And so coming back, it was so different from my upbringing, right? Because I knew I had the same class of kids in elementary school. It didn't change much.
Yeah.
And so coming back to Pembroke, I was like, oh yeah, talking to my nieces, one at the time, she was in high school, she's in college now, another niece who's still in high school, going to band performances, and the traditions that she talks about that were started back when, I was part of the class that split from Silver Lake and started the 9th grade there. And, some of those traditions are still around, and they were started, then.
Yeah.
Or some have stood the test of time, like the lip sync at the elementary schools.
Yeah.
So I think that really speaks to the community, the community focus of our schools, and making sure that we are taking the community concerns and priorities into consideration. And I think that's something that our schools do really well, and our school committee, for the most part, has done well, especially Erin, our superintendent.
Erin Obie, yeah. And what would you say the schools really don't do well at all that they really need to work on?
I think when we're thinking about the elementary schools, I was looking at some of the data around, let me just make sure I have the name right. It was our accountability report. When I saw that, and this is actually not between the elementary schools, but just overall, we got a score as making substantial progress, so 64%. But then when I look at low-income students, that's 26%.
What does that mean? I'm not sure what accountability report is. What is
no
it?
worries. So it basically takes into account different achievement data and different indicators that DESE provides, and they put it together in a formula and give you this percentage.
Okay.
And so based on that, that group of students is not where we want them to be.
Okay.
And same with high needs students, they were at 34%. The other piece there was around the elementary schools. I can't find the data right now, but when I'm thinking about the difference between our elementary schools, there's 3. And I would like to see our data be similar across those campuses, but they're not.
Okay.
And so it's North Pembroke and Habermock had substantial achievement, and then Bryantville had moderate achievement. The percentages I can't recall right now, but that really shows that we need to have some more continuity across campuses. And so I wonder about the ability to have more cross-campus professional development. That's one of the things that I did as part of a network as a teacher, and it worked really well. You're able to push your practice, hear from other teachers, collaborate on what works best for your kids, which might be different than your class or the next person's class.
Right.
But then you can really use your collective knowledge and power to push each other and make sure that you're meeting the needs of all students, and then share resources. So it's a no-brainer to me.
Okay.
And that's one of the things I would love to see is more cross-campus collaboration for the elementary schools.
Okay, excellent. We're going to let you now take about 2 minutes to talk to the constituents out there and tell them why they should vote for you for the school committee.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am Katrina Delaney, and I am excited to be running for Pembroke School Committee. I am from Pembroke. My family moved here in 1996 when we were trying to find another school district that was a little bit better than the one we were in at that time. And I joined, it was my first time in a public school, and Pembroke really, took me under their wing, the students, the staff, and I felt really safe there, and I learned so much. And looking back on my childhood, that's something that I want to continue, all of those great traditions and different pieces that helped create the great education that I received. Some of the teachers that I had in elementary school and high school are still here, and that really speaks to the service and the commitment of our educators. And that's something that's really important to me. Speaking of that, I was a special education teacher for about 8 years, as well as an administrator for 2 years as a special education coordinator and director of special education at the campus level for a school district. And I really feel that that educator and administrator experience has been sorely lacking from our school committee for the past 20 years. We haven't had somebody with that level of experience and that perspective on our school committee, and I think that's something that's vitally important. When we make decisions about students, about staff, we need to have the context of what the philosophies and all of that is in practice. What does that look like in a classroom? And I have that context. The other candidates don't, and that's okay. I think that there's a ton of great candidates, but this is what sets me apart, is that experience and expertise. And I want to bring my active listening skills and my work ethic. If there's one thing about me that you might know, it's I'm a hard worker, and I'm going to do the job, and I'm going to do it well. I'm going to lead with integrity and focus on transparency and listening to residents. And if elected, I will do a good job, and I will listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Appreciate it. And thank you for watching. Please do make your voices heard by voting on or before May 18th in the Pembroke town elections. Thank you and good day.